Robert Abernathy, a.k.a. Bobby the Boxer. A one-time Chicago mob operative and bookmaker and once active in Teamsters Local 726 and identified by the Chicago Crime Commission as a member of the mob. He has since left the outfit to run a window replacement company. Officially, Abernathy was a Teamster truck driver for the City of Chicago Streets and Sanitation Department. Abernathy had been a football star at Weber High School as well as an amateur heavyweight boxer who fought in Chicago Golden Gloves tournaments, winning honors at the La Follette Park Conference and the citywide CYO matches. He trained under the highly regarded Coach Pat LaCassa. Abernathy holds the dubious record of being the only contestant removed from the Chicago Park District Tournament after he allegedly used rough tactics and ended the bout by throwing his opponent out of the ring. He was also a co-precinct captain for the 36th Ward Regular Democratic Organization on the Northwest Side in 1983. Once the political fiefdom of Alderman Louis Farina until Farina was convicted on bribery charges in the early 1980s. Prosecutors alleged that while Abernathy was with Teamster Local 726, that he ran a bookmaking operation with Dan Stefanski, the boss over the local. Bookie and loan shark, Nick the Stick Lococo was brought up in connection with Stefanski. Stefanski later accepted a position with Governor Blagojevich's administration. The two men grew up together in the same neighborhood. While working for the state, he once publicly offered a $20,000 reward to anyone who could provide the address of a mob informant that the outfit wanted dead. Stefanski's pal, Nick the Stick Lococo, who belonged to the outfit's Chinatown crew, was known for carrying a hard wooden rod to help collect debts. He also worked for the administration of Mayor Richard M. Daley as a $90,000 a year general foreman for the city's transportation department. From 1997 to 2002, Lococo managed a long-running city program called Hired Truck. City Hall outsourced its hauling work to private sector hired trucks on a corrupt pay-to-play basis. Contractors paid bribes for the work and then were paid boatloads of money to haul loads for the city. But often they did next to nothing at all. Their trucks would sit for hours, doing nothing. Of the 49 people charged in the hired truck scandal, 33 had worked for the city of Chicago. The only one of the 49 not convicted was Lococo. Lococo met his end in 2004 when he was thrown from a horse and broke his neck and fractured his skull. The death was suspicious enough to require a state autopsy. Robert Abernathy was part of an outfit crew that included Anthony Dote, Carl R. Dote, Roland Ricky Borelli, Frank Frankenstein Maranto, Robert Hippo Skutkowski, Frank Gunnar Catapano, and William Louis Tenuta. He is also related to Marco D'Amico. His brother is married to Marco's daughter. At one time, Abernathy managed Marco's 3, a hot dog stand located at Fullerton and Austin, owned by D'Amico. Bookmaking on sporting events and illegal card games were the lifeblood of what was dubbed the D'Amico Enterprise. Anthony Dote handled the day-to-day operations of the so-called enterprise. Dote had no qualms in using muscle against those who threatened the business. Independent bookmakers and illegal poker games that operated without paying a tax to the D'Amico Enterprise were, according to police, given 3 choices: become a partner of the enterprise, pay the street tax, or get out of business. The Gangsters' enforcers included the Speils brothers, Richard and John and Sean Sontheimer, who stood an impressive 6'7" tall and weighed in at 300 pounds. The Speils brothers and Sontheimer pleaded guilty to extortion charges and participating in a fraudulent insurance scheme in 1992. D'Amico's gathering spot was the Elmwood Park Social Club, 7520 West Diversey Avenue, which was under FBI observation. The D'Amico Enterprise gave big spenders telephone numbers and secret codes in order to avoid detection when they called in their bets. Wagers taken over the phone or in the streets were recorded on water-soluble paper so they could be easily destroyed in the likelihood of a raid. To avoid an audit trail, all transactions were made in cash. Then, to cover up the source of this illegal income, members of Enterprise filed Form 1040 with the IRS. In 1986, the Chicago Police Department Organized Crime Division busted up a sports gambling wire room belonging, indirectly, to Amico's crew and arrested a clique of 6 men who were caught holding 10 kilos of cocaine and $77,000 in cash, some handguns, and $455,000 in wagers. It was the first time that illegal drugs were found in an outfit-owned sports wire room. Informants said that the drugs were produced and smuggled out of Colombia, through Florida, and into the Chicago area where they were to be distributed by D'Amico's organization. In the summer of 1989, mob lawyer Robert Cooley tipped gangster Marco D'Amico to a high-stakes card game to be played outside of Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, where the take could reach as high as $1 million. Cooley, as one of the participants in the setup game, would receive a 20% cut of the take. D'Amico called Abenanti and told him to collect shotguns and a .22 caliber handgun equipped with a silencer and rob the game. Cooley, as one of the participants in the robbery setup, would receive a 20% cut of the take. The day the holdup was to take place, Abenanti phoned Cooley at the Abbey Resort Hotel in Lake Geneva to find out when he was leaving for the high-stakes card game. Abenanti and D'Amico then drove to Wisconsin, but the operation was aborted when a lookout posted outside the gambling establishment waved them off. A local sheriff's squad car had been cruising through the area, thus backing off the robbery team's assault. Unknown to the robbers, someone, probably Cooley, had tipped off the FBI about the robbery and were waiting in the poker room armed to the teeth and waiting for Abenanti to crash into the room. 3 days after the aborted robbery attempt, Cooley entered witness protection, surfacing only recently to testify as a government witness in various trials. Days before the 5-year statute of limitations for the crime was about to expire, D'Amico was indicted on charges of conspiring to commit robbery, operating sports bookmaking and poker businesses, using extortion to collect gambling debts and juice loans, and conspiring to commit racketeering. Also indicted was Abenanti, Anthony Dote, D'Amico's top aide, and Roland Borelli, a former Chicago police officer and D'Amico's cousin. Also charged were Dote brother Carl, Frank Catapano, Frank Moranto, Robert Skutkowski, and William Tenuta. Abenanti was arrested for the attempted robbery and pled guilty after Cooley testified against him. He spent 6 years in the federal penitentiary. D'Amico pleaded guilty, admitting his role in the scheme and his position in the outfit. That came about because D'Amico stupidly demanded that the government prove that he was a ranking member of organized crime. When federal prosecutors let it be known that they intended to call 8 witnesses, including several former mob insiders, to testify that D'Amico was second in command in the Chicago outfit's Elmwood Park Street crew, under John DeFranzo, D'Amico backed off demands that the government prove that he was a made member of the Chicago outfit, and signed a stipulation acknowledging his leading role with the Elmwood Park Street crew and its link to the mob. By signing this stipulation, D'Amico had admitted to his crimes and received a reduced sentence. He was sentenced to more than 12 years in prison. Jailed with him was his cousin, Ricky Borelli, who was convicted in 1995 and sentenced to 10 months in federal prison. Years later, Cooley also said that former Illinois Governor Rod Blagojevich was a Northwest Side bookie in the mid-1980s and paid tax to Abenanti. However, in 2024, Abenanti denied the story, saying, "I don't know what Rod Blagojevich did or has done, but I do know one thing. I never met the man. I never spoke to the man. I never had any business, personal or in any way, with him, and you know what? It's just an injustice." As for Marco D'Amico, he died on April 22, 2020 at age 84. He ended his criminal career as the Chicago outfit consigliere after his release from prison on July 21, 2005. His record included gambling arrests in 1958 and 1968, taking part in an illegal card game in 1976, a public fist fight in 1978. In 1983, D'Amico was pulled over by Palatine, Illinois police on suspicion of drunk driving. D'Amico, who was clearly drunk, asked, "Do you know who I am?" When the officer answered, "I don't know," or cared, D'Amico bit off one of the policeman's fingers. He didn't serve a day in jail for that. The policeman refused to press charges. Later, in 1992, he was taken in for questioning in the car bombing of Sharon Patrick. The Elmwood Park crew lives on. Started in about 1955, it was run by Jackie Cerrone for about 20 years, although at the time Cerrone answered to Tony Capizio, who died later that year. In the early 1970s, Cerrone was bumped up to underboss. Capizio's right-hand man was Johnny Bananas DeBiase. Most people assumed DeBiase would move up to Capizio's spot, but Tony Accardo considered DeBiase too unpredictable and saw Cerrone as one of the smartest people in the outfit. Working under Cerrone, at one time or another over the years, when he was in charge of the Elmwood Park crew, were Willie Messino, John DeFranzo, Joe Andriacchi, Lee Magnafici, Rudy Fratto, Mike Castaldo, and Michael Magnafici. Eventually, Cerrone moved Joe Gags Gagliano in as the crew's new boss, but Gagliano died suddenly in 1971, at 56, of a heart attack, and was replaced by John DeFranzo. Gagliano was Chicago's czar of loan sharking, gambling, and jukebox rackets on the west side of the city and throughout the western suburbs. His record started in the 1930s when he acted as a professional slugger under Frank Nitti. In 1964, Gagliano was indicted with his business partner Willie Messino for kidnapping and beating Joseph Weisful, an ex-convict who owed the Elmwood crew money. Weisful testified he had been kidnapped, strung from a ceiling pipe with handcuffs in the basement of an Elmwood Park tavern, and kicked and beaten. Gagliano was acquitted, but Messino was sentenced to a 10 to 30-year prison sentence. When DeFranzo got bumped up, he handed the job to Marco D'Amico, who in turn handed the job off to Peter DeFranzo, John DeFranzo's brother. When Peter DeFranzo died in December of 2020, Rudolph Fratto, aka Rudy, allegedly took the helm in early 2021. Fratto is part of the infamous Fratto family out of Des Moines that's been associated with the Chicago mob since the mid-1920s and was, essentially, run by Cockeye Lou Fratto. Rudy Fratto was Louis Fratto's nephew. Fratto, born in 1943, popped onto law enforcement's charts in 1997 when he was identified as a member of the Chicago outfit. In 2005, Fratto held a meeting with Michael Mickey Marcello, the half-brother of Jimmy Marcello. The point of the meeting was for the Marcello brothers to take over the video poker franchises in the towns of Cicero and Berwyn. That same year, Fratto was reported to be at a top-level meeting with several other bosses, Lombardo, Andriacchi, John, and Peter DeFranzo, in Elmwood Park with the mayor of Rosemont to discuss how the outfit would control contracts given out by the casino. In October 2009, he pleaded guilty to tax evasion. 3 years later, he got nailed for bid-rigging $2 million in forklift contracts for a pair of trade shows at McCormick Place and was sent away for a year on that charge. That same year, Fratto and DeFranzo were accused of trying to shake down Teamsters treasurer Armando Fosco for $400,000.